And so what I'm going to do first for all of you is to give you some budget decks that I think are decent in Wild right now. I'll do my best to give you the dust on the fly as well. I didn't write that down. I should probably do that for future episodes. But basically, I'm looking to get people who are maybe not interested in Wild or more used to Standard to give Wild a try, especially if you're at low MMR. Honestly, the stakes are pretty low. People aren't doing stuff that's super degenerate. You can get away with a lot of these things and sort of boost yourself with a bunch of wins until you start playing more serious stuff, and then probably still hit Legend with this stuff anyway, to be completely honest. Let's start with Soda Pirate Rogue. I was super skeptical of this version of Pirate Rogue to start. The gear shifts and the shadow steps kind of freaked me out. The fact that we just sort of slammed in Roughhouser without any additional notice was rather jarring for me as somebody who has gotten many Pirate Rogues on Neon 31's site as a net deck. But the more I've played this version, the more I enjoy it. I like the shadow steps a lot. If you're shadow stepping boats to be a little bit more tactical with your draw, almost like we're playing Garrote Rogue, you're basically playing a more aggressive style of Garrote Rogue. We're still going for the crazy start of Treasure Distributor, Parachute Brigand, Patch the Pirate. We used to run Cavern Shiny Finder because we cared a lot about our Swordfish. We really don't anymore. I mean, it's 3 mana for 12 damage because you're probably hitting a pirate on the dredge, but it's less important than it used to be. Solid aggro deck. The dimension of the shadow steps, again, I have found has made this feel less like Even Shaman, where you're just sort of one-dimensional, only making decisions based on what the board state is, and then sort of prisoner to whatever your opponent decides to do, versus you have a little bit more agency. I can shadow step boats. I can shadow step deckhands. I can shadow step cannons. Up to you, really, on how you're going to do it. I could shadow step prize plunderers, probably most relevant for, like, let's say a Miracle Rogue matchup. This deck has just sort of felt nice, and it comes in at a cool, let me check real quick. It comes in at a cool 3,780 dust, some of which you'll have already because some of it is in the commons. So really the only thing you're crafting is Patches the Pirate and the 2 secret passages. If you're crafting Secret Passage, you're doing something right. That card is absolutely busted in Wild, and until it gets nerfed, it seems like it's a safe craft for sure. Aggro Priest is another very strong deck. I saw this net deck off of Neon 31's website, and what I liked the most about it is it cut Neophyte and it cut Cathedral. Cathedral, it feels very good, and I don't mind having it, but having 2 Miracle Salesmen with the tradable oils instead seems like a strong option. This is one of the best decks in Wild. The high roll is disgusting. We have a critical mass of pirates now with Brain Masseuse, able to pull patches, ships Churgeon. We've cut the epics that don't belong anymore, and so now we just have Mind Blast, Acupuncture, and where are you? Mind Seer as my burn spells. This deck is hyper efficient. You can get pushed off of board by other aggro, but to be honest, against anything slow, if you start fast, you can impose your will on the opponent and get the win. This deck clocked in at, let's see how much dust. This deck clocked in at 6,740 dust, a little bit over what I normally would suggest as far as budget decks go, but as far as quality goes, this is such a quality aggro deck, I'd be remiss if I didn't include it. Okay, Horror Potion Priest. This deck has famously been very cheap in the past. It's gotten a little bit more expensive as some epics like Shadow Visions have rotated out of core and back into wild. But since then, what we've decided to do is run double Shadow Word Devours. This is very good into pirates, so we can either make a very large Radiant Elemental or a very large Grave Horror or a very large Handmaiden if we absolutely need to. Before eventually going face with Divine Spirit and Bless. The mulligan for this particular build is very disciplined. You're always looking for Radiant Elemental or Creation Protocol. If you have those two things, you can afford to do Anduin's Gift or Power Word Shield. The extra little wrinkle to this deck specifically is the addition of, where are you? Potion of Madness, and some people cut a Shower Devourer for a Wave of Apathy, which will allow you to steal any large minion, including large Null Rogues, make them and send them face by putting Divine Shield and Bless upon them. This deck is very cheap, as is this version, which is a little bit more catered to that exact combo, either running 2 Nightshade Teas or 2 Wave of Apathies, up to you. Both decks are super cheap. This one clocked in the potion version, pure combo potion version, where you're waiting for the opponent to make a large minion, or at least a large enough minion that you can start stacking health on it. This one clocked in at 2,640 dust, where the horror potion version clocked in at, let me see, 3,000 dust even. So bunch of epics and rares, a couple of bunch of commons and rares, couple of epics, no legendaries to speak of. Something that's in the range of a couple people if, let's say, we've had some nerfs. A deck that has impressed me significantly is this Disco list. It does run the Solarium, which is a decent discard outlet, especially since it goes so well with Malcazar's Imp. But and not for nothing, this card goes in and out of decks like Reno, Warlock, and it's usually frequently played in Seedlock, so it's a decent decent legendary to craft, since it's draw 3 cards, and if you can cycle those cards either with Finley of the Depths, or you are okay with discarding them, or sometimes you're just like, oh shit, I need an out, it's a fine craft. Other than that, the rest of the deck is super cheap, and if you really didn't want to have this, you could get rid of it. I could say the same for the Ziliax. I think it's really good in this deck specifically because it's trying to board flub so quickly. I'm noticing, especially in Standard, we're playing the 1/1 minions. Where are you? The Party Fiends. And Party Fiend and Ziliax are best buddies. Standard Painlock is taking advantage of that synergy already. I would expect this deck to be just fine with that synergy. You could put less expensive things in its place. Something, honestly, I would be remiss not to mention the fact that this deck is not doing Silverware Golem or Tiny Knight of Evil. Where are you? You could either run a threat like Tiny Knight of Evil or Silverware Golem. If you're really in a pinch, I think the added discard outlets would be interesting and good, and you'd feel good about them. And this deck seems fine considering it's a decent budget deck, and we're trying to stay affordable while also experiencing wild. This clocks in at 5,120 dust. If you make those adjustments where you either get rid of Ziliax or the Solarium because you don't feel like crafting them or you don't have the dust available, it gets much, much, much cheaper, and I still think it's pretty effective. I will say the Solarium is the most important of those two cards. I would keep it in the mulligan every time. If you have Solarium and Malcazar's Imp in the mulligan, you almost you wait for 2 mana or the ability to have 2 mana. You play Malchezaar's Imp, you rip Solarium, and you're good to go. A deck that surprised me in how cheap it was until I looked it up is what we would refer to as Cups Mage. This deck is 5,000 dust even. Who said that combo was expensive? We're not running the quest. The only card we're ripping is Sir Finley Sea Guide, and as far as legendaries go, and everything else is super cheap, including Girl. So give Girl spell damage with where are you? Go with the flow, which is an epic. And then copy her with buy one, get one free or reverberations and keep making more and more and more and more. And then all of a sudden you can do things like stargazing into Conjure Mana Biscuit, rip a bunch of Seabreeze Chalices, and you can OTK your opponent as early as turn 3, I've seen, if you get really good with a really strong draw. Mulligan seems to be find Girl and figure it out from there. Does this deck lose to Disruption? Yes. Does this deck lose to aggro sometimes? Yes. But if you like combo, this is a deck I think you will enjoy. You can enjoy it on a budget. My last pick for a budget deck that I haven't highlighted before that I think is worthy of note is this Spell Questline Mage. Now, are you going to see this on a meta report ever? No. Schmoopy, are you trying to dust bait me? Well, it's only 4,180 dust. And I would say that this outperforms what I expected of it. I expected sort of a jank deck. I expected something that wouldn't be super efficient. And the reality is you have things like Malfunction, which is online since we are only running spells. You have some of the old twist technology of Flame Geyser, making a minion that you can then siphon mana if you haven't completed the quest line. And the piece de resistance that gives this deck a little bit more reach is Seabreeze Chalice. This is so much gas post your questline reward. Every chalice itself gets +2, +3 spell damage. So you're basically it's like 3 mana ripping 15. You still got Frostbolt. We still got Wave of Heat Wave if we want to. The secrets you could kind of toggle around. Explosive Runes could very easily be Flame Ward. You keep the same rune, but you get a little bit better into aggro. Manufacturing Era, very good. Refreshing Spring Water, very good. Wisdom of Norgannon, above average draw spell because you can discount it so heavily. I have experienced a lot of success with this deck in the past. I think if I was playing at lower MMR and I wasn't racing to Legend, I wasn't super concerned with how long it took me to Legend. I was just concerned with getting to Legend. This will absolutely nuke Seedlocks. This will give Reno decks fits. And this will do good enough into aggro, especially if you make that cut Explosive Runes for Flame Ward, that I think you could do pretty well into that as well. Definitely a Legend viable deck. And it plays very similarly, I feel, to Standard Spell Mage, where if, let's say, you're a Standard player and you want to make the jump to Wild, but you want to make the jump to Wild playing something that feels very similar to what you're used to, you might have to get used to playing the cadence of the quest line, but everything else is using basically standard tools in a more modern way. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 budget decks that you can use if you want to dip your toe in Wild. Again, at low MMR, these are probably overpowered for what you're going to be facing. Especially, I'd say the aggro decks, the hyper-efficient aggro decks are going to just sort of cleave through any greed. The combo decks should do pretty well. Horror Priest should do better into a little bit more of an aggro section, whereas Potion Priest is very, very good into some slower stuff. Just steal, kill, go from there. Disco's more efficient than you'd expect. Cups Mage is great into greed. Same with spell Questline, though if you're worried about the chalices for most of your spell damage, you're going to want to keep their board clean before you start popping off with chalice. I would say that any of these decks are legend viable. They're all legend viable on a budget, and I'd hope you consider them, and I hope you consider dipping your toe in Wild.